Dear friends, welcome to Woman Unboxed. I'm Chido Victoria, and this is a space where we pause together for a moment, step outside the noise of everyday life, and sit with the stories, experiences, and questions that shape us as women. Think of this as a conversation within a healing circle, where we gently unpack what we have inherited, reflect on who we are becoming, and find our way back to ourselves together. So wherever you're listening from, take a breath with me. I'm really glad you're here. And today, we're unboxing joy as we begin healing our inner child. Have you ever caught yourself in the middle of laughing, like really laughing, and then suddenly felt this strange urge to pull back, like joy was something you needed permission for? Or maybe it shows up differently for you. Maybe rest makes you anxious. Maybe someone offers to help you and your first instinct is to say, I'm fine. I've got it. I can do this. Even when you're exhausted, even when you're not fine at all. If that landed in your chest somewhere just now, stay with me. Today we're going somewhere tender. Somewhere that many of us have been circling for years without quite knowing how to step inside. We're going back to meet the little girl we left behind, our inner child. Not the version who performed well at school, not the one who learned to be helpful and strong and not too loud, the real one, the one who was playful and curious and loud and free before the world started teaching her to be smaller. In the last episode, we talked about not knowing ourselves. And I want to start today with something that I've been sitting with since we recorded that conversation. Often, the part we don't know, the part that feels most unfamiliar, is that child. The one who was told who she had to be before she ever had the chance to discover who she really was. So, I recently came across a quote that completely stopped me. It said, "Joy is the matriarch of a family of emotions. She won't come into your house if her children are not welcome." I had to put my phone down for a minute because a matriarch doesn't just visit. She leads, she sets the tone, she holds the whole household together. But she won't come in if her children are not welcome. And that made me ask myself something I hadn't asked before. Not, why don't I feel joy? But rather, which of her children have I been turning away at the door? I started thinking about what emotions were actually welcome in my childhood. Strength? Yes, of course it was always welcome. Achievement? Absolutely. Composure? That was practically a virtue. But grief? We only allowed that briefly, then moved on quickly. Anger was considered dangerous. Fear? That was weakness. And need was just inconvenient. And here's what I've come to understand. When a child grows up learning that certain emotions make the adults around her feel uncomfortable, she doesn't stop feeling them. She just stops showing them. The child who is told that crying is disrespectful or annoying doesn't become less sensitive. She becomes silent. The child who hears, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about," learns that her tears are punishable. So, she swallows them. But swallowed tears don't disappear. They settle in the throat, in the chest, in the body. And then 20, 30 years later, she sits in a doctor's office and says, "I don't know why I feel so tense all the time. I don't know why I can't relax." We inherited nervous systems that are still trying to protect a child who was never allowed to cry, and the body keeps the score.
I remember sitting on my bedroom floor, quiet tears so mama wouldn't ask what for. She had her own pain, I didn't want to add more, so I learned to swallow mine and lock the door. Daddy was there, but he wasn't there. Passed me in the hallway, didn't even stare. We talk with head nods, not with words. So I learned love don't come unless it hurts. I was 14, trying to patch my own soul. Dress my wounds up in designer and control. Smile in the daytime, cry in my sleep. And when people asked, I just said that's deep. I didn't heal right, I just learned to hide it better. Turn my breakdowns into bulletproof sweaters. Called it growth, but it's just fear in a dress. Called it peace, but I ain't cleaned up the mess. I stitched my scars with silence. Learned to love in survival tones. But truth is, friend, I ain't healed, I just healed wrong. He said,
Now, I want to talk about something that I think is specific to us, to African women, because this is not just personal, it's historical. I want you to consider something. What if some of the discomfort you feel with joy, with rest, with softness, is not entirely yours? What if it makes perfect, logical sense in the context of a history that was never explained to you? Growing up in Zimbabwe, I remember the word "zvevarungu," which literally translates to things of or for white people. It was said casually, almost affectionately, but listen to what it was applied to. You know, pomegranates? They were called chibageche chirungu. It was like a luxury fruit. Any unusual food or something beautiful or refined or upper class was called zvevarungu. Underneath that language was a lesson that the child absorbed without anyone having to say it directly. White is superior, African is ordinary and inferior. The best schools in Zimbabwe were praised for how white they felt. Speaking fluent English meant excellence. Being caught speaking Shona meant discipline. You know, I was proud when I got into one of those schools. I was genuinely proud. My English became polished. I fit the standard. But here I am now, watching my own children struggle to speak or understand the language that raised me, that held my lullabies. That is not just migration. That is disconnection. And the inner child absorbs all of it. She learns which parts of herself are acceptable and which must be kept hidden. Allow me to tell you about the moment I first saw my skin as a ranking. I was in a modeling class. Until that day, I'd never measured my darkness. I just was. My skin was mine. It wasn't good or bad. It was just my skin. Then the instructor, not with cruelty, but just as an observation, said, "Chido, you're the darkest girl here." Although this was said in a neutral tone and not meant to be malicious, neutrality doesn't erase impact. After that, I became aware in a way I hadn't been before. I was aware of lighting. I was aware of who was standing next to me. I started to compare myself. I became aware of which girls kept getting called forward for contracts and which ones didn't. And guess which girls these were? You got it. It was the white girls, the mixed race girls. It was the light-skinned girls. Something in me quietly concluded, okay, there's a hierarchy, and I am lower on it. Now imagine that happening inside a young girl. Imagine her growing up and someone telling her that she is beautiful. Part of her wants to believe it, but another part, the part that learned to count and rank and measure, whispers, "Are they mocking you?" That is how colorism becomes internal dialogue. Not loud, not dramatic, just a subtle doubt that lingers for decades. That's not vanity. That is imprint. The next one is a classic. We heard it before we understood it. Mushamukadzi. The home is the woman. I've spoken about it before and it keeps popping back up. Girls are trained to serve, to be useful, to be accommodating, to shrink themselves into whatever shape would make everyone around them the most comfortable. And then there were stories, stories about girls who had been returned to their families. Returned because they were not good enough wives. Returned because they needed further training. Returned for not pleasing their in-laws. Returned like a product with defects. I don't know if I consciously believed that this would happen to me, but I certainly behaved like it could. I became hyper responsible, became a people pleaser. I stayed in spaces I had outgrown because the idea of being found wanting was terrifying. The inner child learns that belonging is conditional, and conditional belonging creates anxious women. There's another Shona teaching that I grew up hearing. Funda mvura. This means keep water in your mouth. If someone provokes you or disrespects you or is unfair to you, hold your tongue. Don't retaliate. This was one of my grandmother's favorite teachings, and she lived by it. And I understand the wisdom in it. It teaches restraint and protects you from escalation. But here is what nobody told us. What to do with the water afterwards. Nobody said, spit it out later, process it, talk about it. We were just told to hold it. I remember one moment when I knew I was right. I could feel the words forming, the truth sitting right on the tip of my tongue. But I also felt the warning in my body, the years of training and conditioning. So I swallowed them. And the silence I felt afterwards felt heavier than the argument would have. Remember, I'm a Sagittarius and my nature is to be frank and truthful. Imagine a little girl learning how to hold her anger, hold her frustration, hold her sadness. Hold it long enough and you forget it was never meant to stay there. It becomes normal to you. That is how emotional suppression becomes personality. She's so mature. She's so calm. She doesn't answer back. Yes, but she's also carrying unshed tears from 1996. If you don't process your emotions, they process you. I need to pause here and speak about something that doesn't get spoken about enough. Not in our families, not in our churches, not at our dinner tables. And because it doesn't get spoken about, it lives quietly in the body, in the patterns, in the relationships we choose, and the ones we stay in too long. I'm talking about sexual abuse in childhood. If you need to take a breath right now, take it. I'll wait. Many of us carry this, more than the statistics will ever capture, because so many of us never told anyone. Some of us were too young to have the words, too afraid of not being believed, too loyal to a family that might have fallen apart if we had spoken. Or we did tell someone, and that someone looked away or changed the subject. told us to forget it, told us that it wasn't serious enough, or told us to protect the family name. And so we learned very early that our bodies could be violated and the world would keep moving. I won't dwell here long because this is a wound that deserves far more than one podcast section. It deserves a therapist, a safe space, and time. But I cannot talk about the African inner child and leave this unspoken, because for too many of us, this is where the story of disconnection from our own bodies begins. The little girl who experienced this did not do anything wrong. Let me say that again clearly, because she's been carrying guilt that was never hers. She did nothing wrong. What happened to her was a violation of her safety, her trust, and her body. And if the adults around her failed to protect her, that was their failure, not hers. The inner child who was violated learns things about the world that take years to unlearn. She learns that her body is not her own, that it exists for others, that its boundaries can be overridden. She may grow up feeling disconnected from her body, like it's something she lives in but doesn't quite trust. She may struggle with intimacy, either avoiding it or finding herself in relationships where her boundaries are repeatedly crossed, because somewhere deep inside, that feels familiar. She may be hypervigilant, always scanning for danger, always reading the room, always making herself so small that she won't attract the wrong kind of attention. She may also have learned to leave her body when things become too much, to go somewhere else in her mind. And what was once survival becomes a pattern, a dissociation that shows up in moments of stress, intimacy, or conflict. She may also struggle to say no, not just in intimate situations, but in all of life. Because saying no once had consequences she couldn't afford. She may carry shame that she doesn't even feel connected to anything specific, just a low hum, a sense that something about her is dirty or broken or too much or not enough. None of this is personality. All of it is imprint. Let's take a pause here for a minute while I read you some beautiful words that found me. These were written by Najra Zabian in the book Welcome Home. Forgiveness isn't a favor you give to the person who hurt you. It's a gift you give to yourself. Forgiveness doesn't mean that what happened was okay. It doesn't mean that you excuse the damage. You don't forgive because they deserve peace. You forgive because you do. And if you're not there yet, that doesn't make you bitter. It makes you human. Healing isn't rushed by pretending you're ready. It's honored by telling the truth about where you are. Forgive when it feels right for you. Now let's talk about what healing can actually look like. Healing this particular wound is not linear, and it is not something I would ever reduce to a simple list. But I do want to offer some signposts, because you deserve to know that healing is possible, not just managing, genuine healing. It starts with believing in yourself. Whatever happened to you, you are allowed to call it what it was. You do not need the perpetrator to confess. You do not need the family to agree. Your experience is valid because you lived it, and you are not what happened to you. It continues with finding safe professional support. A trauma-informed therapist, ideally one who understands cultural context, can help you process what the body has been holding. This is not weakness. This is the bravest thing you can do for your inner child. It involves gently, slowly rebuilding a relationship with your body. Not forcing it, not rushing it, but learning over time that your body is yours, that it is safe now, that it can experience pleasure, rest, and ease without guilt or fear. And it requires allowing yourself to grieve. Not just what happened, but what was stolen. The innocence, the safety, the childhood that should have been different. That grief is real. It is valid. And your inner child has been waiting a long time for someone to grieve it with her. If this is your story, I see you. I honor the girl who survived, and I honor the woman who is still here, still searching, still brave enough to listen to a podcast about healing on a Tuesday or Thursday afternoon. She made it. You made it. And you deserve to do so much more than just survive. You know, my father fought in the liberation struggle of Zimbabwe, the second Chimurenga. And sometimes I wonder what that means, not historically, but biologically. In a very real way, before I even entered the world, my body was already part of that story. I was forming inside a man who was living through war. All of the survival, all of the fear, all of the vigilance he needed to stay alive, that was the environment I was shaped in. Epigenetics is teaching us that trauma is not just memory. It can be inheritance. You know, our nervous systems can carry the imprints of things that happened before our birth. And oftentimes, the body carries what the mind cannot yet hold. My mother told me that when I was 5 months old, I suddenly refused to drink her breast milk. Just stopped. No explanation. Babies don't have words, but they do have bodies. And bodies respond to everything in the environment around them. Whatever was happening in those early months, something registered in me. Something shifted. I'll never know what exactly this was, but I've stopped dismissing it as a random baby quirk. The body keeps the score, even at 5 months old. And then, when I was about 20 months old, my maternal grandfather died. He died suddenly and mysteriously. Of course, I don't have any conscious memory of it, but I grew up in a culture where grief is not a private, quiet affair. It is a communal, embodied, and loud affair. The wailing, the gathering, the crowd, the weight that descends on an entire household. A 20-month-old baby can't understand death, but she can feel the atmosphere change. She can feel the adults disappear into themselves. She can feel that something has been torn. That little girl had no framework for what she was absorbing. She just felt it. And that's the thing about early childhood. We don't remember what actually happens, but we do register. The nervous system is already learning. Is the world safe? Are the people around me okay? Can I relax? Before we ever have language for it, we're already answering those questions. And many of us grew up with fathers who were stern because softness had never been modeled to them. Mothers who loved us deeply but who were parenting from their own unprocessed pain. Parents who were doing the very best that they could and who were also running on empty in ways that they didn't have the language to name. Then some of us grew up without fathers at all, and that absence writes its own script. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm not worth staying for. And then we carry those scripts into adulthood and call it personality, call it just the way I am. When really, it's a story a little girl wrote to make sense of a wound. The inner child doesn't know history or politics or war or economics. She just knows how it felt. This here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because the inner child doesn't disappear when we become adults. She doesn't politely step back and let us get on with life. She shows up in triggers, in our patterns, in the ways we shrink and the ways we overperform. I grew up feeling like no was a dirty word. People pleasing didn't feel like fear to me. It felt like love. It felt like being a good person, a good girl. It took me years to understand that they were not the same thing. I remember growing up feeling rather useless if I wasn't cleaning or helping or contributing something, especially if I was a visitor to somebody's house. Rest felt like laziness. Play felt indulgent. Even today, I have to consciously give myself permission to just be. And imposter syndrome? Oh, imposter syndrome. I used to be top of my class every year when I was in primary school. My mother was so proud. I was proud of myself. I believed in my intelligence. Until one day, a relative who was a head teacher at a different school looked at one of my reports and said, since my marks were not 100%, I must just be the best in a class full of dumb pupils. The saying, in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. That was the message. That was the message I received, and to me it meant that your achievement only counts if everyone around you is worse. I'm at university right now, more than 30 years later, and I still feel disappointed in myself when I score 85% on an essay. 30 years later, one careless comment, it's still living rent-free in my nervous system. You might recognize yourself in some of this, but maybe it looks like feeling you have to earn rest. Canceling your own plans to show up for your family because the idea of saying no feels like a betrayal or like disrespect. Struggling to receive a compliment without deflecting. How many times have you done that in your life? Feeling guilty when things are going well, like you're just waiting for it to fall apart because it's too good to be true. Staying in rooms you've outgrown because leaving feels dangerous. Your inner child is not your past. She is present. She is here in every trigger, every overreaction, every time you make yourself smaller than you are. I want to invite you, if you're somewhere safe right now, to take a pause. You can close your eyes or just soften your gaze. Now, breathe with me. Take one deep, slow breath in through your nose. Let it out slowly. Now, imagine yourself as a child, not the version in the school uniform, not the good girl, not the one performing, the real one. How old is she? What is she wearing? What does her face look like? Is she playful? Watchful? Tired? Now imagine sitting across from her. She doesn't need you to fix her. She doesn't need you to explain anything. She just needs you to see her. What is she feeling that she never says? Is she tired of being strong? Is she afraid of disappointing someone? Is she holding tears that she hasn't been allowed to cry? Let her speak. And gently say to her, you didn't do anything wrong. You were just a child. You deserved softness then. You deserve it now. Ask her one question. What do you need from me? Whatever comes up, don't judge it. If she needs rest, give her rest. If she needs protecting, promise it. If she needs permission to play, grant it. Take one more breath in and out. And when you're ready, come back. But don't leave her behind. Bring her with you. I'll be honest with you about something. Healing the inner child is not a weekend retreat. It's not a single cry in your car, but it's not reading one book or listening to one podcast episode, even a really good one. It's a lifelong remembering, and it starts smaller than you think. It starts with noticing when you feel irritated by a child who is crying, noticing when rest makes you feel guilty, noticing when someone offers you help and you instantly say, I'm fine, and asking yourself who taught you that your needs were too much. It starts with changing one question. Instead of, why am I like this? Or, what is wrong with me? Which is shame. You ask, what happened to me? Which is compassion. And then, even deeper, what did I need that I never received? Healing is not about blaming our parents. Our parents loved us. Many of them were parenting from survival mode, from unhealed wounds of their own. You cannot give what you were never given, or teach what you were never taught. But understanding that, really understanding it, means we can stop carrying shame for needs that were always legitimate. We can start the work of reparenting ourselves. Reparenting means becoming the parent that your inner child needed. It means when you feel triggered, you take a pause and ask, what does she need right now? Comfort? Permission? Validation? Rest? It means speaking to yourself the way you wish someone had spoken to you. Not toxic positivity, not pretending everything is fine, but genuine compassion. This is hard. You're doing your best. You're allowed to feel this. It's okay to feel sad, angry, upset, or just cry. For African women, this is particularly radical. We were raised to serve everyone before ourselves, and reparenting is a reversal of that order. It says, I matter too. My inner child matters too. And joy? That matriarch who's been waiting at the door. Joy comes in when her children are welcome, when grief is allowed, when anger has space, when fear isn't shameful, when need isn't weakness. That's when she comes home. because your capacity to hold joy increases so much more the more you allow yourself to hold, to embody all of those other emotions. I also want to say this. You don't have to abandon who you are to heal. Ubuntu says, I am because we are. And maybe healing for us doesn't look like isolating yourself and silent journaling, although that can be part of it. Maybe it also looks like telling the story that was never told, speaking that thing aloud, or finding the community of women who understand without needing context. Maybe it looks like dancing in your living room to rhythms your great-grandmother would have recognized. Maybe it looks like teaching your children your language again. Not because English is wrong, but because identity matters. Your ancestors' wisdom matters. They survived so that you could heal. They fought for your survival. You get to fight for your wholeness. And when you heal, you don't just change your life. You change your lineage. You heal the generational trauma and you break a cycle. So before you go, here are a few things that you might want to try this week. There's the letter exchange. You can write a letter to your inner child. What do you wish you could tell her? Then write one from her to you. What does she need you to know? Don't overthink it, just write. The second thing is the joy list. Make a list of things that used to bring you joy when you were a child. Before anyone told you what was wrong or right or appropriate. Before you learned to be sensible. Pick one thing from that list and do it this week. Even if it's just for 5 minutes. Dance to something. Draw something. Play. The reparenting pause. When you feel triggered, scared, or overwhelmed this week, try pausing and asking, what does my inner child need right now? Then give it to her, even a little. Validation, rest, a quiet moment, the words, you're okay, I've got you. You could also try rewriting one script. Identify one message you received in childhood that wasn't true but that you've been carrying. Like, you're too much. Stop crying. Your needs don't matter. Write a new message to replace it. Read it out loud, even if you don't believe it yet. Before we close, I want to offer you something to carry. Place a hand on your chest if that feels okay. And if you want to, say these words out loud or just in your heart. I was just a child. I did the best that I could with what I understood. I survived what I had to survive, but I do not have to live in survival anymore. I release the belief that strength means silence. I release the belief that love must be earned. I release the belief that my needs are a burden. I welcome grief. I welcome anger. I welcome vulnerability. And because I welcome them, joy is safe to return. My ancestors fought for my survival. I choose to fight for my wholeness. I deserve softness. I deserve rest. I deserve play. And as I heal, the daughters who come after me heal too. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being brave enough to look. She has been waiting for you. Go meet her. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end. If anything in this episode resonated with you, or if you feel like there's another woman somewhere who might benefit from anything that was said on the show, please share the episode with her. Let's share the message. Let's get each other talking, change the narrative, get to know ourselves. I'm so grateful to you, and I look forward to more conversations with you. This is Woman Unboxed.